Well, I've got this really beautiful brisket here. If you saw our first brisket video, you know this is a whole brisket, otherwise known as a packer brisket or a commodity brisket. And the reason I chose it is that because it has the point end on it. And the point end of a brisket is the juiciest and most flavorful end. Typically you see flat cut briskets in the supermarkets. We showed you that in the other video. These I don't recommend for doing a good holiday brisket. They tend to dry out and shred. But when you have a whole brisket, you've at least got this end right here, which is going to be very moist, juicy, and flavorful. If you saw the other video, you can tell I've trimmed this up a little bit more. I've taken off some, but by no means all of the fat. I want to keep the fat to get a lot of great flavor in the brisket as we cook it. The first thing we're going to want to do before we get to the real solid cooking part is brown it up a little bit. Now, one way to do it is to take a big roasting pan and put it over 2 burners, crank the burners on high, and just put the roast in the pan until it gets nice and brown on both sides. This is only if you have a roasting pan that is safe to put on top of the stove. If not, you can use my little friend here. And we're going to have a little bit of fun. Because, as you can see, you can brown a large brisket with a torch, and you can see the fat is getting nice and brown. And you got to move it around a bit, but it definitely works. This will take some time, but we're getting some nice brown crust on it here. Okay? If you don't happen to have a torch, and I don't understand why anybody wouldn't, another thing you can do is take it in the roasting pan and throw it in a 500 or 450 degree oven for about a half an hour, and that will start browning the fat and give you some nice melting and browning and caramelizing. And after that's done, we'll move on to stage 2 of the brisket. Another word on roasting pans. If you don't have a large enough roasting pan, you can absolutely use these foil pans that you get at the supermarket. The only thing is you got to use 2 of them, because if you use one, it will collapse when you pick up the pan, especially if you try to hold it by the ends with a heavy brisket or a turkey or anything else. So always use at least 2 pans, maybe 3, and at that point they're rigid enough that they'll be absolutely safe for you to handle. One final thing. This is a fairly small brisket. For a whole brisket, it's pretty small. It was about 9 pounds when I bought it. It's about 8 pounds now that I've finished trimming it up. Typically these can run 11 to 15 pounds, but don't despair. Even an enormous brisket will tend to shrink. There's an old myth, or an old wives' tale perhaps, a story at least, that the reason that every Jewish family dinner includes a brisket and a chicken is because the mom or the wife of the family would see how horribly the brisket shrank as she was cooking it and threw a chicken in at the last minute because she was afraid she wouldn't have enough food. I don't know if that's true or not, but it makes sense to me. At any rate, we're going to put this in the oven now in a very hot oven for about a half an hour, and when it's nice and brown, we're going to take it out and move on with the rest of it. Our brisket is very nicely brown now. It's rendered a lot of fat. So now it's time to go to stage 2. We're going to turn our oven down to about 300 degrees where he's going to braise for a good 3 to 4 hours. But you got to give him some flavor too. Now, we have the big roasting pan, but again, you can use these nice foil roasters that you get from your supermarket. That's what we're going to use right now. So in he goes. And in with the brisket is going to go an absolutely ungodly amount of onions. Okay, I have about 6 very large onions divided between the brown and the red types. I've also got some garlic and some shallots, which are very easy to peel and put into this kind of thing, and they're going to give it a great flavor. Just lengthwise, rough chop. They don't need to be beautiful, and I'll explain why later. So now, all over the top of your beautiful brisket go all the onions. I know it looks like a lot, but they're going to cook down to absolutely nothing. Okay, surround the brisket with your onions. In go your garlic cloves. And in go your shallots. I'm also going to bust up a few carrots in big chunks that will go in as well. Now, you need a cooking liquid, or several actually. First, we're going to start with some beef stock. I make this myself. You can certainly use store-bought, about a quart. If you use the store-bought, make sure you use low sodium. Also, what I like to put in, a can of V8 juice. Nice vegetable-y, tomatoey flavor all over everything. A little bit of kick. We're going to use a little bit of ketchup. I would say this is about a half a cup to a cup, depending on how much you love ketchup. I give it a quick swirl around the pan. And he needs to be seasoned with a good pinch of our seasoned salt. The recipe for this is available on the website, and if you don't feel like making it yourself, we'll be happy to send you some. And seasoned pepper, also my own blend, also available on the website. Now, he doesn't need much more than this. He's been browned on the outside. All we're going to do now is cover him with foil, put him in a 300-degree oven for about 4 hours, and then see how everything cooks down. Brisket's been in for about 2 hours now. It's not even close to being ready, but I'm going to take it out, take a look at it. Oh. And what I'm going to do, just so all the meat has good contact with the moisture, I'm going to flip it over. So you can see it's still quite firm. It's not tender yet. Very hot, obviously. So I can feel when the fork goes in, there's still quite a bit of resistance. So I'm going to turn it over and nestle this down into the moisture. And in fact, I'm going to pull some of the vegetables up and put them on top. It's going to take a good 2 hours more in the oven. My brisket's been in the oven for about 4 hours now. It should be pretty close to done. Let's take a look. See, the vegetables have cooked down. It's nice and brown on the outside. It's shrunk up quite a bit. It's still very juicy. So we're going to do a couple of things, because you could eat it right now and it would be just perfectly fine. But it's going to be even better if you let it sit a day. So what we're going to do is pull him off. Put them in a separate tray to rest for a little bit. And now I'm going to separate the vegetables from the sauce, because I want to take the fat off of the sauce, and that's going to be difficult if the vegetables are still in it. So, veg goes into one container. Looking at this liquid, there is surprisingly little fat on it. That's okay. We're going to take all of it off tomorrow. We can just strain the juice into another container. And we'll wrap him up in foil and let him chill down for a day or two.